Hi, everybody. It's Wednesday. Yeah, it's Wednesday. And I spent the last 2 days working through the hour and a half long stream of Baldur's Gate 3 gameplay reveal from PAX East. And I'm sure it was longer than that because of the number of commercials that GameSpot put in their stream. Oh my God. Like, okay, a few commercials throughout the stream. But pop-up ads, like I couldn't see the bottom of the screen because I had to keep clicking off ads for Toronto Defiant. For people who don't know what that is, that's an Overwatch esports team. But yeah, it was really annoying. But the game itself, actually, speaking of ads, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, because I really don't like those hard ad breaks in long videos. So I don't want to do them. So your support is greatly appreciated, especially since the stuff I do is ripe for demonetization. But this video is probably going to be low traffic, but I want to make it anyway because I talk all the time about, focusing on what's good and what you like instead of what's not good. And I gotta say, the Baldur's Gate 3 demo, I was a huge fan of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. I have not played anything from Larian. I think that's the name of the studio. Larian Studios. I have not played, what is it, Divinity Original Sin? I have a game called Divinity 2 in my Steam. Someone told me that's not it. It's a different game. So I haven't played Divinity Original Sin or Divinity Original Sin 2. But so I don't know anything about the previous games. I'm just comparing it to previous Baldur's Gate games. And what I kept thinking of is, oh man, Bioware and the Dragon Age franchise should be worried about what Larian has put on display here. The build was super rough and super early, and they admitted as much. They admitted like the save game file doesn't work yet, and the visualizations on visual range for turn-based sneaking and stuff like that needed work. But it still showed a lot of promise. First of all, in terms of depth of gameplay, it is a really neat combination of like a midway point between the action that modern gamers used to action RPGs like the Witcher franchise want, meaning you can like climb ladders and jump and you can do like a third person follow camera. Why would you? Isometric so much better tactically. But if you want to, you can. But the way you can use the environment in battles and the way evasion is more legitimate, those all look really, really good. Like, it's gonna be a massive quantum leap in terms of gameplay from Baldur's Gate 2. Of course, it should be. That game came out, when did Baldur's Gate came out? Early 2000s? 99? I think the original Baldur's Gate came out in 99. I can check the copyright date on the box. See, I've got a where is it? A Baldur's Gate box behind me. Can I reach it? Proof of fan. I still have my original box from the, there's a game in it too. Cool. But I've got my box from the original Baldur's Gate. Here we go. And this is from, wow, I taped it all up. Copyright. This is 1998. You know how old it is? It has a wording on the side, does not work in DOS. That's how old this game is. And then the sequel came out a few years later. So yeah, ages 13 and up. But yeah, so obviously I'm a fan of the Baldur's Gate franchise. But the thing, and this is going to sound really weird, the thing I liked about it is, yes, there are rough places. Yes, some of the voice acting sounds like it's from 1998 in places. They can all clean that up. It feels like they just made a game instead of trying to make a point. And what I thought was so awesome about the first Dragon Age game, which was a spiritual sequel to the Baldurs Gate games, and I'll put my Baldurs Gate thing back. See, aren't I clever? I've got like the ball skull next to a skull. See, you like what I did there? I get proud of really pathetic things. But the first like Dragon Age Origins, which was, we're going to make Baldur's Gate without the Dungeons & Dragons license, was that they were just sort of reimagining an epic sort of Tolkien-style quest or high fantasy meets fairy tales. And they just ran with that. And they ended up touching on some kind of eternal themes because they weren't diving into making a point about some sort of modern political thing. And the the thing that was so cool originally about the Dragon Age franchise is how they combined different cultures, how they sort of combined indigenous Americans, indigenous Canadians with gypsies, Roma. Sorry, some people don't like the term gypsy. Roma, and then kind of a bit of historically Jewish people with the elves, the town elves, and then the oh god, I almost called them the Scoia'tael, the not Dro, Dalish elves. They combined that, and then they combined the Ottoman Turks and the Spartans for the Qunari. And they did this cool sort of fusion things. So if you knew what you were looking for, it's like, oh, that's really cool. But it wasn't, look, we're making a commentary on the tensions between the US and the Soviet Union right now. No, they weren't doing this. This isn't a Tom Clancy brand, right? They were taking stuff from history to inform fantasy. And then it started being, we're the LGBTQ plus franchise. We are making a point. We are woke. And the storytelling just reduced. And that's the critical point, right? Like if they were putting in all this kind of politicized material, and the story was still good, I'd applaud them. The story wasn't... tropes started getting recycled. Things started being very thin. It began more about which characters you could boff as opposed to truly meaningful relationships where characters like peel back like an onion. That was a real disappointment for me with Inquisition, is that even with Dragon Age 2, it being scaled down, being a smaller game in scope, there was some truly memorable characters and plot moments, some really cool political intrigue. You had characters like the Arashok, and then who was it, Commander Meredith with the Watch. They were good characters, and they were complex, and the things they did forced you to think, and they had reasons behind it. And after that, it just sort of got into, I don't know, we're going to make Skyrim with some Dragon Age characters. Baldur's Gate 3 seems like they're actually trying to make an interesting Dungeons & Dragons adventure. And I admit that the characters they showed off in the demo looked extremely cliche. But that's why I'm saying it's like Dragon Age Origins. Dragon Age Origins, all the characters started off as cliches. I mean, they named her Morrigan. The Morrigan. Morgan Le Fay. It's a trope. Alistair, the sort of Arthurian lost king. It's a trope. you got the dwarf smiths, you got the rogue with the heart of gold and Zavran. You've got the fallen, the warrior who's lost his honor in Sten, that kind of stuff. And then Sten is of course sort of the Star Trek alien kind of character as well. But the more you played the game, the more you got to see these characters sort of individualize, and they're not just a trope, they're people. And I see shades of that in the development of Baldur's Gate 3. I don't see too many terribly interesting looking character designs other than the Githyanki. I'm kind of really excited there's a Githyanki party member, which there should be. If the main bad guys they called it Ithilids. I say Illithids. But I love I'll say it the way they did, Ithilids. I love the Ithilids. Completely freaks my mother out. But they're terrifying, and they're a good villain. And it was always, I don't care about these. I mean, okay, John Irenicus was a great villain in Baldur's Gate 2, but I always found the Underdark like the best part of Forgotten Realms, because everything could kill you, and it was so terrifying and interesting and really believable that these really martial, violent cultures would come up in such harsh conditions, right? I mean, the Drow, as they call them, are some of the. I think they're one of the most interesting fantasy races ever, because they're a militant matriarchy, indistinguishable from most militant patriarchies. It's just the women are in charge instead of the men. I love that. It shouldn't be as rare as it is, but Forgotten Realms is such a great campaign setting, and I think it's really cool that they're running with this. They seem to have a real understanding of what's cool about the Forgotten Realms. And I think Dragon Age kind of lost sight of what made it cool. They may have gotten thrown by the fact that when they started, Game of Thrones was not a thing as a TV phenomenon. And Dragon Age borrows very, very heavily from A Song of Ice and Fire. So maybe they got a bit rattled when that happened. I don't know, but I won't say the writing, the conceptualization in Dragon Age lost its way. The writing certainly lost its way. And I'm seeing this sort of neat little labor of love feeling with Baldur's Gate 3, where it's not snazzy celebrity voices. Maybe they're placeholders. Maybe they will come in later. The graphics are good, not great. Now, those could be optimized as well. They do their job, but it's not the Frostbite engine. It just seems like a humble product that wants to tell a cool story. And oh man, I am so with meaningful combat that's an innovation on the franchise historically. And I am so down for that. I am so like, yes, please, on that. I was kind of disappointed when David Gator wasn't involved with this project, but it seems like they've done something that I can be hopeful is an interesting job. I hope they kind of lean into the cliches, a vampire thrall and a dark mystic and the sort of snarky rogue. I hope they lean in to those and make them kind of interesting, but it seems like they're being thoughtful, and it seems like they have an idea. And that's the idea, is basically to make a really cool Forgotten Realms Dungeons and Dragons inspired game, and not to try to make some kind of point about something. And I personally think this is going to sound weird, but sci-fi, science fiction works better in terms of political allegory. It's much easier to do with sci-fi because it's so military, right? It's so basically submarine battles in space. And so, and that goes back to Wrath of Khan. They were the ones that used cinematic techniques normally used to do submarine battles or dogfights, and use them for the battles in that movie. But Wrath of Khan was a very literate movie, both in terms of, in order to understand Wrath of Khan, just look at the shelf in Khan's little, living quarters. It tells you like Moby Dick and Paradise Lost and all the sort of source material for that story. It's very cool. But, The Expanse is great in dealing with, they're so combining so much stuff, but it is like there's a lot of political intrigue. Fantasy is more difficult because it's sort of, people get really hung up on the medievalist look, the medievalist aesthetic. And what Dragon Age did well early on with Origins is they recognized, you can have a medievalist aesthetic, but you can add, an indigenous culture. You can add somebody that's more like the Turks, the Ottomans. It doesn't have to be so European white. And you can do that without going, look, people of color. But then, of course, people complained that there were no people of color in Dragon Age Origins, which wasn't true. Duncan was from, was Riveni. He had dark skin. Nobody noticed. Duncan had dark skin. I'm sorry. See what I did there. But then, the Dragon Age franchise increasingly was more and more about appeasing its critics than giving their fans what they wanted, because unfortunately more and more the fan base and the critic base were the same people. And I'm hoping that with Larian, because they have a different relationship with their fan base, I hope they don't have to do that. And so they'll just get this really neat story that scratches that itch without trying too hard. And if they do, if this first look is a sign of things to come, then if I was BioWare, I'd be very, very nervous and realize that the company has to stop fucking around and get it together and go back to telling timeless, truly inclusive stories. Maybe beg David Gator back on bended knee and let him do what he wants. Maybe, just saying. I don't think that's going to happen now. Oh, Scout agrees. But I'll leave it there. I'm super stoked. I'm extra super stoked because I am not holding out hope with Dragon Age. Hopefully it'll be great, but there's no reason to expect it to be great. And if smaller companies are picking up the slack in this space, because now we're not going to have another Witcher game for a while. It's going to be Cyberpunk, which is a different aesthetic. So if you're like me and like this sword and sorcery crap, then this will allow us to get that through a smaller company, and leave the bigger ones. CD Projekt started really small, right, when they started The Witcher. So I'm looking forward to Cyberpunk too. It's just a totally different thing, right? So I can have that, like I can have my dystopian sci-fi fix, because I love that setting too, and then I can have like my sword and sorcery fix, and this is what's great, that people pick up gaps in the gaming landscape when somebody falters, and it's exciting. I wish them well. Like I'm looking forward to seeing more from the studio on the game, even though it was so rough. They had such a hard time with the demo. The guy was sweating the whole time, but that made it cooler somehow because it was just so authentic and raw. And it looked like they put together the demo like really super fast last minute, which was charming in its own way. So if you like this kind of stuff does not do well on YouTube. The traffic is garbage. So help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.